Hello everybody, this is Conquering History Games, and welcome to an introductory guide, not for a specific country, but for an entire mod itself. Today I am going to be doing an intro guide for Hearts of Iron 4 Equestria at War. This intro guide will be current as of the Riverlands update version 1.3.1, but I am only going to be going over sort of broad concepts that are integral to the mod itself. So whether you're watching this the day that it comes out or you're watching it in the future when a third continent has been added, the basic concepts that I discuss in this video should remain the same. Now, the reason why I wanted to make this introductory guide, because it's not the first one on YouTube, is that without trying to sound rude, without trying to sound mean, I don't think that the current intro guides that people have on YouTube are adequate. And that's including the stuff that I've done, my Let's Plays, because I don't really take the time in my Let's Plays to talk about the different mechanics. I often just go figuring that anybody watching this already knows how it works. But there's basically two types of categories of introductory videos that I've seen so far. You've got videos that are made by people who are into My Little Pony, and they don't actually really know Hearts of Iron 4. Maybe they bought it and they're just barely figuring it out, but they're trying to figure it out through the lens of the sub-mod. They've never even played the vanilla version of the game, and so they're a little bit lost in that sense. And then the other type of intro video that I see is one that you have somebody who's an experienced Hearts of Iron 4 player, and then he wants to try out the Equestria at War mod, and the whole time they have to act like they're being dragged kicking and screaming to do this, to going, oh god, wow, oh I can't believe this, and then like somebody's forcing them to play the mod, and then it inevitably turns into them clicking around and going, oh wow, wait a second, there's actually a lot happening here, and then they end up either reading a lot or they skip the reading and they're lost, and they're just not good introductory guides. That would, like, to me, that would be like if your math teacher came in and then was handed a calculator and goes, oh well, can calculators do this? So I just click these buttons and then I can add and multiply and divide? Whoa, and like, that's your teacher? So I'm not trying to be mean to anybody who's made videos. I just think that they're not coming from the best place to do that. So what I'm going to do in this video, which is probably going to be a pretty lengthy one, but I'll try to, as quickly as possible, get some good timestamps in the descriptions below, and maybe even pin a comment with some timestamps, is talk about what separates Equestria at War from vanilla Hearts of Iron 4 primarily, and although I'll probably occasionally refer to some other submods, but it's mostly going to be for people who are coming from vanilla Hearts of Iron 4. So we're going to just jump into it. Now the first thing is, what's the most popular submod, right? Submods for Hearts of Iron 4. You got Road to 56, Führerreich, Kaiserreich, alternate history mods, where a lot of the you're just seeing historical figures in different situations than you normally would. You know, King Edward VIII during World War II, things like that. But Equestria at War was the first, and in my opinion, the best Hearts of Iron total conversion mod. There are no historical figures here. This is a brand new world. There's not even any humans in it. And so as a result, it could be much harder for somebody to get into. Speaking of a lot of that what I just said, so a lot of what I'm talking about, if you feel that I could have maybe gone into more detail about it, there is an Equestria at War wiki that is very useful. I'll try to link that in the description below. And they answer a lot of introductory questions as well. But something that's kind of funny is I only found this out when I was getting ready. I was putting some bullet points down to make this video. I'm quoted in this. If you turn away from this mod because of the pictures, you are missing out on what is, in my opinion, the best total map conversion mod on Hearts of Iron 4 right now. And I still stand by that statement. I believe that's from my Lunar Empire campaign, episode 1. But it is an amazing mod, and people get caught up in the pictures of the horses. and the deers and the griffins and whatnot. And you're just missing out if you're just not going to play because of that. Incidentally, any sort of people drinking the haterade down in the comments section below, basically people coming in and telling, writing comments that essentially translate to, hey, I don't like thing, so you don't like thing. I'm just going to ignore it and or if I see it, I'll probably just delete it. Anyway, this is a total fantasy world in Equestria at War. There's a lot of countries here that are playable. There's new ones added all the time. I believe there's over 60 at this point. And so what we're going to do just to start is we're going to select Equestria, since it's probably the one country that most people know. It is the country where the main characters of the show live and whatnot. And we're going to jump into the game, and I'm going to start talking about the different mechanics that are different. Now, the first thing I want to mention is you're probably listening to the music and noticing this is not from Hearts of Iron 4's soundtrack. And that is because, this is a very important screen here. We're just going to close it right now. I'm going to come back to it much later. And one of the first things that I think is pretty cool here is if you open the music player, they have an extended soundtrack. And they have a toggle switch here, so you could have only Hearts of Iron 4 music playing, only Equestria at War music playing, or a mixture of the two. We're going to set that for Equestria at War music only for right now. There actually is also a Equestria at War music mod that I play with when I'm playing on my own time, but I don't have it on right now because there is some copyrighted content on there. So, this is Equestria. Now, some of you might be going, I don't know the lore of this world. I don't think I can play that. Well, you don't really have to. There is really useful introductory guides here. If you come ever down here, if you close this screen early, you just come up here, hit the question mark help, open up this bar, and then open the welcome screen. And for whatever country, you're going to have the name of your country, and it's going to give you a few paragraphs explaining what the situation is. And as a way to emphasize that you do not need to know the lore of Equestria or of My Little Pony or whatever to play this game, this entire second continent of Gryphonia, while it incorporates elements of the lore, is essentially all original content on the part of the developers, who, incidentally, thanks for making this amazing mod. So, you could be somebody who's watched every single episode of every show, all the movies, whatever, and I should stop saying whatever. I sound like a Valley girl, but and you don't know anything about the Gryphonian Republic because these are original concepts that are often though based in these are like some historical parallels over here. But anyway, moving back to Equestria, so I guess I'll talk a little bit about this. I'll talk a little bit about certain countries towards the end of the video. Again, refer to the timestamps, in which I will, suggest maybe some interesting ones for beginners to play or more experienced people to play, and what kind of gameplay you could be looking at. But Equestria is a country that is made of many different types of communities that have come together underneath Princess Celestia, who is an alicorn, so like she's think of a Pegasus with unicorn horn or a unicorn with Pegasus wings, and this is where I want to start actually, is with the political systems of Equestria at War. You see, the people of Equestria live underneath a princess. She's royalty. She is the undisputed leader of the entire country, except when there's geopolitical issues. But so her party ideology is harmony, essentially meaning that everybody in this community gets along very well. That does not mean democracy. And in fact, if you were to go into their focus tree, here's one of the dozens of unique focus trees that exist here in Equestria at War. It's possible after a series of events to become a more democratic society or create a constitutional monarchy. Things like that. If you go over here to this nation of Stalingrad, this is a communist country, but it can go down different branches of communism depending on who is their general secretary. You have different styles of monarchies. So, for example, you have the non-aligned Kingdom of Wingbardy over here, as well as the King Morset Discret under the Kingdom of Aquilea, here on the continents of Gryphonia. And those monarchies are going to be different than, say, the Gryphonian Empire, which at the moment is non-aligned, but could also still continue to have a monarchy, but be considered fascist. There's also empires that could arise that are under authoritarian monarchs that are classified as fascist in the political pie chart. But just because, what I'm basically trying to say is, just because you still have the basic, essentially, democracy, non-aligned, communist, fascists, like you do in the base game, that does not mean there's not more political complexity here, just because they don't have the 10 ideologies of Kaiserreich or the 11 ideologies of Führerreich. There's more to it than meets the eye. So, continuing here in the political banner, or tab, I should say, is let's take a look down here at development. So the laws in government, research, and military staff, these are basically the same as your regular game. Although one thing I do want to point out quickly is that if you move off, you still have you can just pay a flat 150 political power to change to any sort of economy law. But there are consequences to trying to game the system and maybe get war economy or total mobilization early by just doing a super quick war. For one thing, you have to actually be at war to do either of those things, so it's not enough to just be fascist or even have enough war support. You have to be at war. But also, war economy and total mobilization both cost you daily political power gain whenever you have them implemented in your country. So let's just pretend for a second that Equestria was able to go to war immediately with enough war support, and they didn't have their economy laws blocked. And they switch to war economy in the first year or something. Well, now you have curtailed your daily political power game for the rest of the game. So you need to ask yourself if it is worth it. So that's just one example of the changes that have happened here in Equestria War. But anyway, moving back down here. So you have this development area here in your political tab, divided into 3 sections. This third one we're not going to talk about for a little while, but I am going to get to it. You have your science base and your industrial base, and this is reflecting the society, your country, or the state of your country is what I should say. So, for example, Equestria is a very modern country, and so it has a developed science base, which has no consequences. However, if we were to go, maybe let's just pick anybody here in Gryphonia, the county of Longsword. This is a country with a small science base, which kind of makes sense. It's a little bit outside the more civilized areas. There's not a lot of infrastructure here. They're kind of on the frontier of the Gryphon lands. So their science base is smaller, meaning that they have to pay an additional 55% on their research times. Although, alternatively, they do get daily political power gain. So that's the slight balance that you get from having a worse science base. What the heck's... There we go, having a worse science base. So you've got substantial, small, and poor. So there's different ways that you can fix these if you're somebody who does not quite have a developed science base. Yes, they can science base yet. It can be fixed through decisions, focuses, events, political power. There's different ways depending on the country. The other thing you've got here is your industry base. So this is a modern society, forefront of economic and industrial capabilities. There's no negative effects, but you have several other types of societies here, some of which can have severe consequences to your economy. So if we went, say, to the Gryphonian Empire, which is a relatively advanced country, but not the most advanced country there could be in the Gryphonian continent. They have an outdated industrial center, so it's hurting by 10%. Their factory, dockyard outputs, construction speed, as well as research time and resource efficiency gain. That kind of sucks. But there's definitely worse out there. Let's look at a really extreme example. The Arcturian Order, that is an isolated, essentially penal colony based on the Night's Watch of the A Song of Ice and Fire series, is a detached country which has horrific effects such as a plus 800% research time. Much different from Equestria. This is by no means a mod where every country is balanced. They're all starting in vastly different areas of technological growth, political growth, industrial growth, and things like that. But sticking over here in the society tab, again, depending on the country, you can change this, and there are some interesting benefits to some of them, such as the communal society. For example, you're getting additional attack and defense and stability on your core territories anyway. But they can be changed through focuses and decisions and payment of political power and things like that. Now, over here, you've got your race tab, your race, I don't know what else you would call it. Yeah, like the race section of the development area. There's never going to be other options here, unless they're going to make changes in the future, but there shouldn't be. And this is what species is the main one that inhabits your country, but it's more than that, as we will see when we get to the tech tree. But for example, Equestria is the ancestral homeland of the ponies. It's pretty much all ponies here, so they have the pony race. If we go over here to the changelings, look at their details, they are the changeling race. The deer race. We've got Gryphon races over here, the dogs, and there should be more to come. For example, the minotaurs are unspecified as of this moment. They do not have their own unique focus tree, although as long as I'm here, they do have a unique focus tree compared to the vanilla game, but I'll talk about that a little bit later. We're going left to right here mostly. And so now we're going to go on to decisions. So the decisions, you have a lot of similarities, such as the improving of workers' conditions to other versions of Hearts of Iron 4. You have things like construction projects that can give you additional civilian factories, infrastructure. You can work on resources. You have a lot, like right here at Equestria, as you can see, there's lots of them for rubber and chromium and tungsten and all sorts of things. But here's something particularly interesting. You can do major military exercises, in which you either can do military training for army experience gain that costs you political power as well as command power, or you can go for practical doctrinal experiences. Any one of these three costs experience in the field that you're trying to get the doctrine bonus in, as well as political power. So these are interesting ways to get good research bonuses for your doctrines on the land, air, and sea. Moving on from decisions, you get the tech tree. Now the tech tree is where things really start to get very cool, very cool here in Equestria War. And incidentally, check out the research picture. I'm not going to point out all the examples of it throughout this campaign, this video, but there is a lot of attention to detail like that in how the world is shown to be, the MLP world. For example, I don't know if any of you noticed, but the diplomacy, because I have the colored button mods for Equestria War on here, the diplomacy button is a heart, and the production, it's a pony hoof holding it. And you've got these ponies wearing helmets, and it's called pony power, not manpower. So things like that. Anyway, coming over to the tech tree. The first thing you're going to notice is that it's much bigger. It extends for many more years than the base Hearts of Iron 4 does. But more than that, it also adds technologies in several areas. Both ones that are more advanced than your usual technology, ones that are totally different in their own categories, and you have ones that are even worse than the normal Hearts of Iron 4 stuff. So for example, we're all familiar with Infantry Equipment 1 and Basic Infantry Equipment, but you also have muskets over here, if we go over here to the Macintosh muskets, and Canterlot swords. You can have medieval equipment here. So for example, if we were to tag over, just to use another extreme example, to the, might need to get the, what's the HLR right? If we were to tag over to the Arcturian Order here, and we looked at their technology tree, we'd see that they only have medieval melee weapons. They don't even have access to gunpowder, essentially. So very, very technologically backwards. And the reason why they do this is to just, again, show the imbalance that exists across the world in terms of technology. And it is so extreme that it can lock off other areas of your tech tree if you do not have these things researched. So, for example, you can't research motorized equipment because you don't have basic infantry equipment. You cannot research land doctrines because you don't have basic infantry equipment. And even if you went to your Navy, you can't research anything in your Navy because you don't have basic infantry equipment. It gets even better. If we go over here to artillery, we cannot do the artillery until we have muskets, because how are you going to research artillery unless they wanted to put trebuchets in here or something if you don't even know what gunpowder is? So that's one of the ways that the technology tree is different. But it goes beyond that. If we look here again in the infantry tab, you'll notice that you have your regular infantry rifle line, but there's also these colorful ones below. These are magical rifles, which in the simplest terms, they're concentrated magic so that anybody could pick them up and shoot magic rays. Okay, that's the simple version of it. And they are basically superior to regular infantry equipment in every way, with a couple of small exceptions. So, for example, if we were to just compare these two, or the earliest version of infantry equipment, magical infantry equipment, to infantry equipment 2. The magical one has better soft attack, breakthrough, hard attack, things like that, but it costs more for one. It costs 50% more to be exact. Also, its reliability is only 50% compared to 90%. Now, that reliability is going to improve with time. So, as you can see, when you go to the next level, it goes up to 60%. But it is a noticeable difference. Now, here's where I'm going to have to start jumping around and things are going to get complicated. So, just try to keep track. It's not as big a deal that the reliability is worse, because another thing that they've done, for this we go to the production menu, is you can actually make variants on your guns. So you could do things like increase their soft attack, you could improve their reliability, improve the speed of the units that carry them, better defense, whatever. You could do it to the magical ones too. And so it's a small, but in a way it could become significant way to modify your infantry templates. And you also will get access to magical infantry, which is particularly good for the ponies for reasons I will discuss later. Now, as of the latest patch notes, you can no longer assign magical infantry equipment to your mechanized divisions and motorized and things like that, although that seems to kind of be in a flux, but don't worry about it too much. The point is that you could possibly switch your entire army over to magical infantry equipment, but you probably are going to want to keep at least a little bit of the regular stuff around. But other changes that we have here, for example, is if we go over here, to the tank tree. Not only has it been extended, but it kind of still merges interestingly enough. So instead of just going to light tank 3, you can possibly go all the way down to light tank 4. Although there's going to be consequences for you doing that. So, for example, what's one of the strongest reasons, or one of the strong arguments for making light tanks? Well, if you're a country that doesn't have tungsten, you're going to do that because you can't afford to build medium tanks because you have no tungsten. Once you get to light tank 4, though, now you need it. And once you get to light tank 5, you need chromium. So when you're checking out these new technologies, you might want to scout ahead a time to see what happens. And then eventually the light tank merges into the modern tanks, just as the heavies and the mediums did. And then eventually, even the super heavies get incorporated into the moderns as well. But you can go very deep here, as you can see. Other things is check out the art. But you have other new technologies, such as here. This is a nuclear battleship, I believe, battle cruiser. You have a nuclear battle cruiser you can eventually open access to, as well as nuclear carriers and nuclear submarines. You could, and to do that, you go over here to your atomic research, And nuclear bombs is not the end. You then get naval power and thermonuclear experiments, which lower your research time as well as giving you access to those sorts of things. Another new technology is the radio direction finding ones, which are good for fighting off guerrillas and things like that. Your industry tree is bigger. Interesting. I think this is kind of funny how the production splits, but then it comes back in again. And then finally, you have your, in this case, pony technologies. So for that, we have to once again go back to the political branch. You are a pony nation in the case of Equestria, so you get access to the pony branch of tech. In this case, you have bonuses that are given to the Earth, the Pegasi, and Unicorn ponies, the three major branches of the pony species. And you also have access to basically what this entails is you can get some certain nationwide bonuses. For example, Earth Pony Agriculture is going to lower your supply consumption. This is not something exclusive to Equestria. They could do it, but so can, say, Stalliongrad, because they're also, if we look here at the details, a pony nation. But you also can get specific bonuses for units, brand new unique units that belong only to ponies, such as Pegasi. Pegasi are essentially very fast infantry that get bonuses in certain areas. You can see here hills and mountains and things like that because they have their wings. And if we were going to go over here to the Pegasi division, they can be parachuted because, you know, they're ponies with wings. So that is a special forces unit for the ponies. You also have this interesting support company called the Mage Company. Now this is where it gets a little bit into almost being like an MMO RPG. Because the Mage Company gives certain effects, but those effects can be changed depending on what branch you go down. So for example, if you were to go down Magical Supremacy, you can get additional piercing, additional armor for your units, be they infantry, tanks, or whatever. I gotta stop saying whatever. Yeah, piercing and breakthrough, air attack, soft attack, things like that if you went Magical Supremacy. Or you can go Harmony and get a little bit less breakthrough, but you get trickle back and less experience loss. So maybe you could stack that with Field Hospitals, Divination, more initiative and organization. And then it could be further, specialized. For example, your magical infantry equipment can get bonuses. Or you can go Disperse Training, and then your entire army is getting certain types of bonuses. But this racial technology tree is going to be different depending on what nation you're playing and what that nation's race is. So for example, if we were to go up here to the Changeling Lands and checked out their research tree, see theirs is different. They have a different type of special forces unit, for example, known as the Jaeger. They're light infantry. They get bonuses, for example, in the urban cities, they get that sort of a bonus. They also move a little bit faster than regular infantrymen. Instead of a mage company, they have infiltrator companies, which give bonuses to fighting in cities and forts, which is pretty cool. But also you can modify it more. So you can go down here and get additional breakthrough. You can go over here and get additional reconnaissance and suppression. While we're talking about suppression, we're going to sneak over here and look at the recruit and deploy. You'll notice there's no cavalry divisions, and if you were to look here, there's none that you can modify it to. Long story short, even though slavery exists in this game, horses cannot ride horses. So because of that, infantry get better suppression, but also if you go over here to the support companies, every tier of military police gives you an additional +1 suppression, and that's just meant to be a balancing kind of thing. Other different technologies you've got is if you look at the air, you can have jet carrier planes, carrier fighters I should say. Alright, now that we're done with the tech tree, we have a couple other things we can talk about. I want to talk about trade now. There's a new resource. Gosh, this is what happens when I don't have like a proper script and I was speaking off the cuff. But there's an additional resource in Equestria at War called crystals. This is in addition to the tungsten and the rubber and everything else that you know. The crystals essentially serve two purposes. They are used to create magical equipment, and they are used for nukes, which leads me back to the welcome screen. Now, this welcome screen is going to always pop up no matter what country you play as, or it should. I always recommend you read it, especially if it's your first time playing a country, because it's going to give you a lot of helpful information. Like for example, it'll tell you the infrastructure of the world, and mechanically, it'll also explain to you that one of the changes in nuclear warfare is that crystals are needed to build nuclear reactors. The crystals, if you run out of them, you can't build any more nuclear reactors. So it's a balancing act, but also it's balancing how many nukes are going to be able to potentially be thrown around, because nukes are now much stronger. Now I'll leave it to you to actually read through this section here on the mechanics for nuclear warfare changes. Basically, nukes are just acting the way that nukes probably should, or at least more like that. You can always check the changelog through this screen as well. But region is very good, so you know what kind of terrain you're going to be up against and what kind of potential enemies that you are going to have to be dealing with. Pardon me for a second, let me drink some water. Okay. Now, let's see, we've gone through production. I talked a little bit about that. Recruiting and deploying and how you don't have cavalry. And logistics. Okay. So now we can start talking about stuff besides these tabs here. First thing about Equestria at War. The AI is much better. They will take doctrines that are good for them. So, for example, the changelings, they get bonuses to a lot of mobile warfare and stuff. So, wait, there's just like land doctrine, but I'm pretty sure they have something for mobile warfare. Yeah, here we go. Research bonus for mobile warfare. So the AI is like a human player going to say to itself, my focus tree gives me bonuses for mobile warfare doctrine. Maybe I shouldn't do grand battle plan. Things like that. They are the team that makes Equestria War has enabled the AI to be able to make dynamic decisions to change to events around it, and they're improving on that all the time. And they also make much better division templates. Obviously, there's a lot of units in Equestria War that don't exist in vanilla. For example, Jaegers do not exist in vanilla Hearts of Iron 4, so the AI has to be taught how to build them. And so what they've done is just generally the AI tends to be better about making divisions that are going to be stronger. They know that they're going to need anti-tank guns if they're facing a swarm of tanks and things like that. So before we start getting into countries here, a couple other things I wanted to point out is one of the mechanics is Operation Paperclip, in which you get post-war research bonuses. We already talked about the music toggle. We already talked about the various AI improvements. Now, it's been improved, but don't expect a miracle, okay? I'm just saying. And then I already talked about racial technologies and things like that. Okay, so now I am going to talk a little bit about some certain countries, ones that, like if we went back to the menu here, ones that are gonna, I think, good for beginner players to check out, and maybe if you're somebody who's already a little bit more versed in Hearts of Iron 4, ones that could be more challenging for you to check out. So I'm at least going to talk about most of these ones up top, but I'm also going to talk about some minor countries. So of course we have to start with Equestria. Also note how I have historical AI checked. You actually can turn historical AI on and off. And whoops, I accidentally clicked the wrong thing. Okay, there we go. So Equestria. Equestria, and incidentally, there is a section for this on the wiki also. What country should I play? I don't know if I'm going to go over everything that they did, but you know, kind of gives you a general vibe. So Equestria is sort of a mix between the United States and the Soviet Union in this game, in the sense that they are a sleeping giant industrially that can be awoken and basically be unstoppable. So in that sense, they are like the United States. In another sense, they're like the Soviet Union in that they will usually be attacked by the Black Country, that being the Changeling Lands. They will lose a lot of territory, but then they will be able to rubber band back and win the war. There's a lot more to it than that, of course, but even though it's sort of the base country, you could say, there's a lot of interesting political decisions that could be going on here. So, for example, if you were to take Dark Force, you could spark a civil war. Supporting the left also sparks a civil war. Separate civil war, actually. In fact, you know what? I would say, because I think they've said they're going to rework this, I would not play Communist Equestria this way at the moment. There's other ways you can play Communist Equestria, but I think this stands to be improved. You can create a constitutional monarchy and things like that. So you have a lot of civil war options, but you also have the option to go fascist and declare the Solar Empire, since Princess Celestia is the one who moves the sun through its sky, who raises it every morning, and that's one of the reasons why she is worshipped. She can tap into the dark forces of the sun, pun intended, although I'm not even sure if that's a pun. That's probably not the right word for it, but... So you've got a few civil wars that can happen, a couple potential coups of the government and things like that are going on in Equestria that definitely make it interesting, especially because its national spirits, especially stagnation of harmony, can sometimes hold it back from being as strong as it could potentially be. Now, their arch nemesises are, of course, the changelings, who are going to always be the main aggressor on this continent, especially when you have it on historical AI. Queen Chrysalis is very upset with Princess Celestia, and so she is going to seek revenge. Now, even though the changelings tend to be a bit of a one-track mind, as a human player, and maybe sometimes on non-historical AI, you can actually do the Thoraxian Betrayal, and democratic supporters can start a civil war in the Changeling Lands, and you can then take that route instead. And then if you're playing on non-historical AI and Equestria was to, for example, go fascist, the Changelings could, ironically enough, become the ones who liberate Equestria from their evil authoritarian monarch. That's just a small example of how every game can be different. Now, maybe you're looking for a little bit more of a challenge. You're the kind of person who likes to play Poland and get squeezed between the Soviet Union and Germans and hold on. Well, then the Kingdom of Olenja might be for you, because they will almost always get attacked by the changelings, and they're going to be outnumbered and outgunned, and Equestria is not going to help, usually. So that could be a good challenge for you to hold them off, just using your savvy and, of course, your poor infrastructure and terrain as well. Think of it as very winter war against the Soviet Union, even though the changelings are meant to be the Germany of the continent. Also, unique technologies. And even then, even though you're going to almost inevitably be attacked by the changelings, you can go a couple different directions. You can try to restore the quote-unquote true queen to the throne, because your current queen, your current monarch head, I should say, is considered illegitimate by many. And you could form an alliance with Equestria, which would make the fight much easier. Or you can choose that you're going to be equals with them and not join their faction at all. So you can strike your own path and not be dependent on them. But you can also go communist. You can keep the king in charge, who is in charge. You can go religious fascist. Those are always very fun in this game. Sacrificing deer to the gods and things like that. Until eventually you get to a great holy war, in which case you're going to actually attack Equestria itself. So that could be a very interesting country to play as. If we go over here to probably the most famous name of a country from this mod, Stalingrad, you've got a communist government. This one can go in a lot of different directions, and not just because of the three leaders that it has. Even within those leaders, there's different directions they can go in. For example, Stalingrad claims some areas of Equestria here as core states. Maybe you can play Stalingrad so that you attack Equestria in order to get your cores back. while the changelings are attacking them. Maybe instead you attack Equestria while they're in the middle of a civil war and nobody's going to stop you from grabbing those provinces. Maybe you help Equestria and you fight off the changelings, and in return for that you are given your core areas. You could help freedom fighters in Nova Gryphonia if a military junta takes charge up here. Stalingrad is able to help the people who are fighting for their freedom, and could give you a war goal to attack north, things like that. So there's just a whole lot going on. There's just a couple more that I wanted to point out. If we go to, the TDE bug here, TDE bug. Yeah, let's take a look at what's going on over here in Gryphonia. So this continent has a lot of interesting major powers, but at one point in its life was ruled almost entirely by the Gryphonian Empire, which is now very sickly. It's the sick bird of Gryphonia, as they call it. And, well, spoilers alert for something that's just going to happen a couple of weeks into the game. Your emperor is going to die, and then his young child will be made emperor, which means he needs a regent. And then after your regent is chosen, you're going to go in a lot of different directions. Now, the Gryphonian Empire is one of those countries that actually has relatively little choices because they're just meant to expand and expand and expand, and a lot of the other countries on the continent are meant to react to it. So, moving in a spiral outwards, you have these nominal vassals of the Gryphonian Empire that break away that are gonna break away when the emperor dies, and they could try to keep him down. For example, in the case of Phthisia, and just have maybe they're the Gryphon Empire now. Look at me, Gryphon, I'm the Gryphonian Empire now, or they just don't want an empire anymore at all. You've got the Gryphonian Republic that claims to want to bring democracy to these areas of Gryphonia. The Kingdom of Aquileia has several different paths it could take, going communist or democratic or fascist or other things, but it'll usually go democratic. The Skyfall Trade Federation has multiple political paths and could find itself in alliance with other members of the Gryphon race to suppress the Gryphonian Empire. You've got even small areas here like the county of Gryphon with just really crazy focus trees that can take you into some strange areas, including game overing yourself deliberately or sacrificing your people. There's also a character over here in Gryphonia who's genociding ponies. Things can get absolutely wild out here in Gryphonia. Not that the Equestrian continent is not fun, but it's just because there's so many more countries. Some interesting alliances and crosses and things like that could happen. You have the Kingdom of Wingbardy here, which has its own is a leader of a faction at the start. It could also go communist. It can go democratic. It could stay non-aligned, but it'll usually be under Biccolini, who I'm sure I don't have to say who that is based off of, and he'll create a power base in the south and could potentially challenge the Gryphonian Empire for control of the continent. Speaking of control of the continent, you have over here the Gryphon Liberation Army. These are communists. They're locked in the middle of a civil war whenever game starts. But they're very poor. They're uneducated, but so is a lot of the country, a lot of the continent. If you look through here, you'll see a lot of mass illiteracy, poverty, things like that weren't able to... Problems that didn't have solutions implemented until later, meaning after the game started. But the Gryphon Liberation Army is in the middle of a civil war, and then it can expand in different directions, even though it's technologically behind. But you can have this interesting case where they take Gryphonstone, which is a very important ancient city to the Gryphon race, especially the nobilities. So you could have the Gryphonian Empire and Wingbardy teaming up against you if you're playing as the Gryphon Liberation Front, or Liberation Army. You got other ponies out here, of course, the River Republic and Nimbusia. These are just two of this loose coalition that could potentially merge into a super nation. You definitely check out my Nimbusia and River Republic campaigns to see how I dealt with those situations one way or the other. So what I'm basically saying, I probably started to talk too much, is that there's something for everybody in this mod, and you definitely should check it out. Please let me know in the comments if there's things you feel I didn't touch on. I can try to answer questions. And yeah, I hope this was helpful for you. You all have yourselves a wonderful day. Bye.